When Genshin Impact was released, 6 out of the 7 elements were made playable, and among the original 5 stars, Diluc, Jin, Kuting, Mona, and Qiqi, Pyro, Anemo, Electro, Hydro, and Cryo started out with a 5-star representative, leaving Geo as the only element to not have a 5-star unit bearing its vision for quite some time. It wasn't until the release of Zhongli and then albeit a few months in. Prior to that, the only experience players had with Geo was through Noelle, Ningguang, and I suppose Aether and Lumine to a lesser extent. The lack of representation during the early days of the game left Geo to be neglected for quite some time. Even after Zhongli and Albedo were brought to us, that would be all the attention the element got for basically an entire year. During all of version 1, players had their eyes on the other 5 elements in an effort to establish a dichotomy of sorts, with the consensus that it was too early to form any conclusions around Geo when there weren't that many characters to fill its lineup. Unfortunately, as the time went on and the Geo roster finally received new additions, players began to realize just how insular of an element it really is. Despite its characters performing well, it became apparent that was only by virtue of their individual traits, and any viable composition pertaining to it severely restricted your options. With all this in mind, I think it's about time to make a video analyzing the Geo element, why it's almost unanimously considered the worst element in Genshin Impact, as well as propose a few changes that would greatly benefit it in the future. Out of the 7 elements, I actually consider Geo to have the most creative structure. Given that it's based on Earth, the main theme in regards to gameplay is that of defense and solid mass, not unlike traditional values of the Earth element in other games. To me, it's very akin to rock and ground types in Pokemon. Those 2 elements, defense and solid mass, lay the foundation for how Geo and its characters would operate, beginning with its sole reaction, Crystallize. Similarly to how Anemo's Swirl interfaces with Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, and Electro, Crystallize is able to absorb any of the 4 elements, producing an elemental shard that when picked up, generates a shield for that element, and while it blocks damage from all sources, it's more effective against the corresponding element. Now before going any further, let's break down the issues with Crystallize. Seeing as it's Geo's only reaction, for it to be worthwhile, it has to perform well in a lot of different scenarios. Anemo's Swirl deals a blast of AoE damage based on the element absorbed, letting you take a single enemy affected by Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro and spread it to surrounding enemies. In a way, Anemo doesn't necessarily assimilate a target element, rather it distributes it. This allows you to gain the benefits and effects of whatever element you spread by proxy, making it easier for you to pull off chain reactions on a bigger scale as Anemo skills are able to force enemies together. That's the main reason why Anemo is the strongest element in the game. It can copy and amplify the effects of any one of 4 other elements from damage to reactions. Geo technically possesses the same ability, but on a far more limited scale. Unlike Swirl, Crystallizes effects are purely one-dimensional. Picking up a Geo shard merely gives you an elemental shield. For example, it's not like having a Pyro shield makes you apply Pyro to anyone you touch. This means the only thing that matters about it is how much damage it blocks. Here's where we encounter the biggest problem with Crystallize. It's essentially the same argument used to question the viability and necessity of dedicated healers. As of version 3.1, every element that can possess a shield, so that doesn't include Anemo or Dendro right now, currently has 1 or more characters who are capable of forming one on demand. Pyro has Thoma, Xinyan, and Yanfei, Cryo has Kaya and Diona, Hydro has Candice, Electro has Beidou, and Geo has Noelle and Yunjin. Meanwhile, Zhongli's Jade Shield is 1.5 times more effective against all forms of damage with the exception of true damage, making it an omni-elemental shield more or less. Say you have Diona on your team for a Cryo application, and you use her Icy Paws followed by some form of Geo damage. You already have a Cryo Shield from Diona's elemental skill, making the Cryo Shield from Crystallize completely redundant, as shields in this game don't stack in mitigation due to all of them taking damage simultaneously. Now you could make the argument that Crystallize allows you to forego defensive support and go for more damage, but there are 2 reasons why this is not true in practice. 1. Crystallize shields are laughably weak on their own, let alone the redundancy. At most, they can protect you from 1 heavy attack from a regular monster, that's about it. Considering player instantiated shields are magnitudes more efficient and plentiful, there's absolutely no pragmatic incentive for you to actively seek out crystallized reactions as a form of protection. 2. If your objective is to go for more damage, there are far better alternatives. You will likely do more overall damage using a healing or shielding unit that can proc any other reaction than a DPS unit proccing Crystallize. It is without question the most underwhelming elemental reaction in the game. Even if the shield value from a Geo shard rivaled that of a character-generated shield, which will never happen because that defeats the purpose of them, that wouldn't do a whole lot to increase the appeal of it. On-demand healing or shielding is always better than conditional. Not saying that achieving Crystallize is particularly challenging, but since it is a reaction, there's steps you have to take to acquire the shield, and it would be very cumbersome to have to time it so that you get a shield right before a heavy attack. Moreover, even though I did say in the past that the need for defensive support like shields and recovery is gradually rising, it's still not at the forefront of priority and it likely never will. Other gacha games are modeled around utility being typically exclusive to dedicated supports, making them obligatory as DPS units would be completely worthless without a tank or healer protecting them. Genshin features a plethora of units who can supply both DPS and cover either by way of using elemental reactions or through their built-in moveset. Additionally, almost all elemental bursts grant invincibility frames during their attack animations. When timed correctly, that allows players to avoid powerful enemy attacks, further lessening the need for safety. And of course, in the overworld, you have access to food dishes and can teleport to any statue of the 7 to heal back up. If Genshin didn't have Pokemon centers, then maybe survival would take more precedence, but that's not the case. So not only is Crystallize horribly inefficient, but it's also just not unique. I'm aware they added onto Crystallize through stuff like Archaic Petra, which behaves quite similarly to Virtus and Venerer, where upon achieving Crystallize, your entire party gets 35% bonus damage for that particular element, but trust me when I say, the 40% shred on Swirl is so much better in total damage output than this. So it wouldn't be a stretch to say the Geo element has no elemental reaction. In other words, the only way for Geo characters to be of any use to their team is through their own merits. Kind of reminiscent to physical damage dealers, Eula manages to overcome the inherent limitations imposed on her from being a physical damage dealer through sheer force, but even then she's held back by not having elemental reactions to boost her performance outside of Superconduct. In a way, Geo has this very same issue. No matter how strong Ito, Albedo, Zhongli, etc. are, they will forever be less effective or versatile than the other 6 elements because they have no elemental reactions to augment their capabilities. To give you an idea just how problematic this is for Geo, look no further than its own Archon, Zhongli. Ever since he was buffed in version 1.5, he garnered a reputation for turning Genshin into Minecraft Diesel mode, providing such overwhelming raw defense that you were able to face tank everything in the game to the point where some began to purposefully not use him just to make the game feel more challenging again. Zhongli's greatest strength is that he functionally works in any team composition, but he's only a comfort pick, never an efficient one. The resistance shred from his Jade Shield may appear to supplement the lost damage from having a Geo character, but in virtually every situation, it's just better carrying a damage dealer or someone who can make use of reactions. Sound familiar? That is the same obstacle Crystallized faces as a whole. Since there's no avenue of cross-pollination between Geo and other elements, everything within it can only be useful to those who belong. The Elemental Resonance Enduring Rock increases shield strength by 15%, obviously meant to synergize with Geo's affinity for shields. Characters protected by shield gain 15% increased damage, and damaging enemies will decrease their Geo res by 20% for 15 seconds. On its own, these bonuses are rather impressive. 15% increased damage while shielded and shredding Geo res by 20% is far more substantial than 25% bonus attack or HP, but it costs you 2 Geo slots to obtain this benefit. Even if the 20% shred was for all elements, you're sustaining too big of a loss in efficiency by way of party slots. With only 2 slots remaining, all relevant party compositions are unfeasible. You can't pull out the national team, Chain Freeze becomes too inconsistent given that in most situations you need more than one source of Hydro and or Cryo, Taser is out of the question, Soup is also impossible. At best, you can maybe pull off a 2-man Vaporize or Melt combo like Yoimiya and Yelan or Hu Tao and Xingtuo. That's about it. As a result, the only place the majority of Geo's roster can find success in is with other members, rendering the element wholly insular. That is, if you're trying to make the most out of Geo itself. Some characters like Albedo or Yunjin provide stat boosts that grants a token bit of synergy with other characters. I feel like miHoYo is well aware of this, hence why they made it so Geo's Resonance encourages everyone in the party to deal Geo damage, and a number of characters have talents or constellations dependent on the number of Geo characters in your party or are exclusively meant to augment other Geo units, even down to the hyper stat of choice, Defense. Noelle, Albedo, Ito, and Yunjin scale off mostly defense, a stat that while plentiful, on account of how frequently they appear in artifacts, isn't present on anyone outside of Geo besides Xinyan, who faces her own set of obstacles. All buffs that increase defense are only useful on those characters. A prime example of this is Goro. His elemental skill, Inuzaka All-Around Defense, creates a banner that provides up to 3 buffs to active characters that are close by based on the number of Geo characters currently present. At 1 being himself, you get a defense boost, which I already explained is only beneficial to Geo characters. At 2, you get super armor, never a bad thing, and at 2 characters it also means you obtain Geo Resonance. At 3, you get a boost to your Geo damage. Additionally, his passive talent increases all party members' defense by 25% for 12 seconds. As an extra benefit, Constellation 6 boosts your crit damage of Geo attacks by up to 40%. In his defense, no pun intended, the amount of buffs Goro sources to his team is insane. But aside from the super armor, all of the bonuses are strictly tied to Geo and its units. It's not like Bennett where almost everyone benefits from attack or Sucrose for elemental mastery or Shogun for energy. Even the 40% crit damage only works specifically on Geo damage. This pattern is echoed throughout other premier Geo characters like Ito, whose second constellation causes his elemental burst to charge faster and come back up sooner based on how many Geo characters are in your party, and his constellation 4 boosts attack and defense by 20%. It's not just a stat boost either. A recurring theme within Geo's roster is that of summoning Geo constructs. Player may structures composed of Geo energy that interact with your party and the enemy. Some of them are also solid objects you can climb on top of, making them useful for reaching otherwise inaccessible or hard to reach places while exploring. Aside from their own properties, Zhongli's pillars can resonate with nearby Geo constructs, spreading the pulse effect and damage to other Geo constructs for more coverage. Once again, the only characters who can summon Geo constructs are Geo characters. You might be asking, what's wrong with having abilities tailored to a playstyle or element? Ordinarily, nothing. We have tons of characters who are specifically designed for a party. In fact, not too long ago we just got Nilo, whose passive talents explicitly state she's meant to be used for Dendro and Hydro based interactions, right down to who is in her party. In her case, there's a lot of controversy surrounding how exclusive she is, but my point is, there are other units who share this habit as well. So why am I covering Geo in particular? Simple, Geo itself is terrible. The characters are fantastic and I love their team-centric playstyle, but with such an abysmal reaction, that sense of isolation from other elements makes it difficult for players who want to use Geo characters to their fullest but can't because they're lacking the wherewithal or units to form a strong party. To repeat, it's very possible for Geo units to find success in other parties. Yunjin's a staple choice for auto attackers like Yoimiya and Ayato, while Albedo's elemental mastery boost is helpful in a good number of scenarios. Fundamentally though, there's only so much they can do and it renders a lot of their designs somewhat linear. I know I'm about to piss off a lot of players by saying this, but Noelle and Ito have very similar experiences. Both elemental bursts imbue their normals with Geo damage, and both of them have increased attack based on their defense, essentially turning both of them into beast sticks who smack their opponents to death. Meanwhile, the shield and defense-based nature of the element leads to redundancy in supportive benefits. Noelle, Yunjin, and Zhongli have shields, and though earlier I said it was a creative way to incentivize proper team coordination, the need for multiple Geo members in your party does more harm than good when you take into account Genshin Impact's entire experience is founded on mixing and matching elements to achieve a stronger outcome than the sum of its individual part. The insularity of Geo contradicts the very notion of how this game was meant to be played. In my opinion, all of this could have been easily remedied if Geo had meaningful reactions. It's the element of Earth. I find it kind of confusing that the only reaction they could think of was Crystallize. There are so many possible reactions with Geo. If you combine Pyro and Geo, it should have something to do with lava, molten rock. Combining Geo and Hydro could do something related to mud, maybe bogging down enemy movement or keeping them stuck in place. Combining Geo and Anemo could cause a dust storm. So many different ideas you can use for Geo, and the only thing they came up with was Crystallize. But let's indulge that for a moment. As it stands, shields that provide only defense are just not cutting it, hence why Zhongli's shield has an aura effect that lowers nearby enemy resistance. If there was a universal way we can convert that defense into offense, that might open up the door for Geo to be a worthwhile composition to go after. Granted, it's already quite strong, but far more expensive and requires a lot more investment due to the need for specific units, unlike Taser, Freeze, or National, which are more accessible. It would also be nice if Enduring Rock was changed to shred all resistance by 20% instead of solely Geo. That wouldn't solve the root problem, but it's better than nothing. In essence, Geo has the potential to be just as influential as other big name elements like Anemo and Hydro, but it prioritized the wrong things. Instead of addressing that, MiHoYo decided to double down on it by designing its characters to brute force Geo into relevance. And it succeeded. Kind of. Whether intentional or not, Geo has become sort of an island on a conceptual level, separated from the rest of the cast. Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, Anemo, Electro, and Dendro are comfortably mingling with each other and mutually benefiting, while Geo is left to fend for itself. It's not objectively a bad thing. If they were gonna choose a lone wolf element, then Geo was probably the best candidate for that. But just like how physical damage dealers are in dire need of support, Geo will have to be self-sufficient. Then again, I don't think it's going to receive a lot of attention anytime soon, what with the spotlight currently on Sumeru and Dendro. Perhaps I'm being overly pessimistic. I did say Geo has found their place in the game, I just think there's so much wasted potential with the element and how it's holding back its characters. Genshin's all about combinations and permutations of elements, that should also include Geo. Earth is arguably the most adaptable element, and yet in this game it's the most rigid. But what do you guys think? Do you have any suggestions for how they can improve Geo? By all means, you're welcome to share them in the comments down below. That's all I have to say for today though, so if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and if you'd like to support me further, check out my Patreon. By donating, you get access to benefits for all three of my channels, Vars, Vars 2, and Vars 3. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.